Montu is a Kemetic Kushite deity who is associated with war. And again, we find ourselves looking at this pantheon of deities who we would say originated in Canis Major, in that star system. This was a deity, of course, who was associated with the pantheon of the Kemetic and Kushite deities. And he had a cultural center. This was a very popular deity during his time. This deity had great popularity. There were several temples built in honor of this deity. The foremost we'll talk about is the Temple Complex of Montu at Medamud, and this was built during the 12th dynasty, probably on some existing sacred site, and the courtyard was used as a dwelling for living butchous bulls, which were revered as an incarnation of this deity. So we'll talk a little bit more about his connection or representation as a bull. In addition to that temple, there was also a temple at the great Karnak Temple Complex, just north of the monument Temple of Amun. There was a temple commissioned by King Amenhotep III, and it was a sacred enclosure that was established in praise of Montu. Another temple had also been dedicated to him in a little-known forest area near the second cataract of the Nile during the Middle Kingdom. So this was a god who enjoyed, great popularity during those kingdoms, and partially because this was a war deity. He was typically depicted in human form with a falcon's head, which is very similar to other Kemetic deities, but later became identified with the Bracis bull for his strength. Montu became the embodiment of conquering vitality of the pharaoh, and this was important at this time because Kemet was going through massive expansions. They were conquering new lands and expanding the territory. This is a very ancient god. He was originally a manifestation of the scorching effect of Ra, or the representation of the sun, and in early times was even depicted as Montu Ra. And the destructiveness of this character led to him gaining the characteristics of a warrior, and eventually led to him being widely revered as a deity of war. And the way that the Kemites saw Montu is he was there to attack the enemies of Ma'at, which this would be truth or the cosmic order. So a very inspiring deity in the type of battles that he was taking on, and at the same time he remained a glorious warlike exploit that this deity took as he was fighting for righteousness. Now, the importance of Montu, especially during that 11th and 12th dynasty, was he foretold victory. So many pharaohs would try to associate themselves or identify themselves with this particular deity. There is literally a passage talking about the pharaoh Ramses II, and this is written about him. Ramses II, whose victory was foretold as he came from the womb, whose valor was given while in the egg, bull firm of heart as he treads the arena, godly king going forth like Montu on victory day. And this was on some sacred texts that were left in reference to Ramses II. But this god, because again, we see very consistently that bulls are very often associated with strength and war, and this was no different. So they believe that Montu himself was the manifestation of butchous bull, and we would see other belief systems around the world embrace the concept of the strength of the bull, and Montu himself was often depicted as with a bull's head. So he remained very popular basically up till the 12th dynasty. At the end of the 12th dynasty, he was replaced by other deities of war. But the significance of this god, we saw worship of the butchous bull in many other sacred sites around Upper and Lower Kemet and into Nubia. What I get from doing a little research on this particular deity, Montu, is that this is one of the most ancient deities or deifications that we've seen. It's very early in the Kemetic Nubian pantheons, and this is a deity who changes forms, at one point being merely a representation of the effect of Ra or the sun, obviously in reference to the desert, But later he becomes a full-fledged deity himself that rises to great worship and the inspiration for several temples that still exist to this day. And then we see this deity, like many others, be passed up as new rulers come and invade and change the areas, or migration patterns change, and people start to view the world slightly differently. But I will say that this deity deserves our respect, as he has become, not only central in a conversation that we will later have about and the connections between different civilizations, but we'll also look at this link and connection among bull representations among various gods. So thank you again for stopping in at Nine World Chronicles. Be sure to check out our website, nineworldchronicles.com, if you want to check out further stories or see how some of these stories are starting to link together. Thank you again for joining us. Please like and subscribe.